Why did no one ever really see her? That was the question Emma Carter had asked herself more than once, though never out loud. She didn't like drawing attention. She didn't like being noticed. She had perfected the art of fading into the background, the quiet girl behind the counter at the morning brew cafe, where the day began for construction workers, nurses, students, and hurried businessmen. To them, she was just the blonde barista with the faint smile, trembling fingers, and polite apologies when the foam took too long. She was invisible, and that was exactly how she wanted it. At 5:45 a.m., she always turned the key in the cafe's lock. The air smelled of roasted beans, sugar, and yesterday's pastries. The hum of the espresso machine was her only company. She arranged the muffins, set out the croissants, wiped down the glass. By 6:30, the regulars trickled in. She handed out coffees without ever really being seen. People noticed the drink, not the hands that made it. They noticed the change in their pocket, not the voice that whispered, "Have a good day." Her coworkers, Sarah and Miguel, joked loudly with each other. They never really asked Emma anything. They didn't have to. She was reliable, efficient, and silent. Furniture, almost. And yet this life of quiet anonymity was carefully constructed, almost rehearsed, because Emma Carter was not just a barista. 3 years earlier, people hadn't just known her name. They had said it with weight, with respect, sometimes with desperation. Staff Sergeant Emma Carter, United States Army, combat medic, Kandahar, Mosul, places she still tasted in her sleep. She had saved 47 lives under fire. She had whispered comfort to dying men, promising them help was coming even when she knew it was. She had performed surgeries in bombed-out houses with nothing but a flashlight and a prayer. And then one day she had simply stopped. No explosion of anger, no dramatic breakdown, just a quiet realization. If she saved one more life, she might lose whatever remained of her own. So she had walked away, declined re-enlistment, disappeared into civilian life. Now she wore jeans, sneakers, a brown apron, and kept her hair in a loose bun. She avoided eye contact. She lived her life in silence, in hiding. The only clue was the silver necklace she never took off, a caduceus, the medic's symbol, usually tucked beneath her shirt. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever asked. Until that Tuesday. September 17th began like any other. The cafe bustled with the mid-morning rush. Emma worked quietly, sliding lattes across the counter. "Grand vanilla latte for Jessica," she called, her voice barely louder than the hum of the machine. Jessica didn't look up from her phone as she took it. Emma turned back to the register. An older man in a business suit stood there, studying the menu with exaggerated concentration. He looked like someone who'd been up late worrying, someone who didn't know what he wanted, not really. "Take your time," Emma said gently. He squinted. "Do you have oat milk?" "Yes, sir. Is it extra 50 cents? He nodded, pulling out his wallet. "Medium cappuccino with oat milk, please." Emma entered it into the register, calm, quiet, automatic. And that was when the door didn't open, it exploded. The bell above it didn't chime, it screamed. A man in a black ski mask stormed inside, a revolver in one hand, a canvas bag in the other. "Everybody down, this is a robbery. Nobody move and nobody gets hurt." Time fractured. A woman near the window screamed. The businessman dropped his wallet. A college student dove under a table, spilling her iced coffee across the floor. Emma's hands froze, her breath caught, her vision tunneled. The man's gun shook in his hand. He was young, too young. Maybe 22, 23, not steady, not practiced. That made him dangerous. "Money now," he shouted, waving the weapon toward Emma. She nodded, forcing her fingers toward the cash drawer. Training whispered in the back of her mind, training she had buried under 3 years of silence. Comply, assess, survive. 14 customers in the cafe, 2 exits, front door, back kitchen, 3 possible weapons within reach. The hot coffee pot, the steel steam wand, the pastry knife. But he had the gun and he was nervous. Nervous men pulled triggers without meaning to. Her hands shook as she slid bills from the drawer. It wasn't an act. She was afraid, just not of him, afraid of herself, afraid of what she might have to become. "Faster," he screamed. The businessman beside her lifted his hand slowly. "Just take the money, man. Nobody wants trouble." "Shut up." The robber swung the gun toward him. And then it happened. The businessman lunged. Perhaps he thought he was being brave. Perhaps instinct simply drove him forward. Emma saw it all in slow motion. His hand reached for the barrel. The robber's finger tightened. "Don't!" Emma shouted. The gunshot shattered the air. The businessman staggered, crumpling to the floor, clutching his stomach. Blood spilled between his fingers, dark, spreading across the cafe tiles. The room erupted. Customers screamed. Chairs toppled. The robber froze, staring at the weapon in his hand as if he couldn't believe what it had just done. "Oh God," he stammered. "Oh God, I didn't mean." Emma's mind split. Track 1, the barista. Run, hide, call it in. Pretend this isn't your problem. Track 2, the medic. Assess, stabilize, save the life. For 3 years she had let Track 1 win. She had scrolled past headlines, walked past car accidents, pretended she didn't know how to help. Every time it was like burying a part of herself deeper. But now blood was pooling. A man was gasping for air, and the robber still held the gun. Something inside Emma snapped back into place. Her hands stopped shaking, her breath steadied. The cafe noise faded. She didn't think, she didn't plan, she moved. "I need a clean towel." Her voice cut through the panic like a blade, not loud, not hysterical, just commanding. She vaulted the counter, smooth and practiced, her sneakers squeaking on the tiles. Dropping to her knees beside the bleeding man, she pressed her fingers to his neck. Pulse, thready, shock setting in. "Sir, can you hear me?" His lips trembled. "I ca." "Don't talk, save your breath." She peeled his hand from the wound. Entry point, left abdomen, no exit. The bullet was still inside. 10 minutes maybe before blood loss became irreversible. Emma looked up sharply. "You," she snapped at the college student cowering under the table. "Stop crying, call 911, tell them we have a gunshot wound to the abdomen. Male about 50, conscious but going into shock. Location, Morning Brew Cafe, 5th and Madison. Now." The girl scrambled for her phone. Emma turned to another woman frozen by the pastry case. "You, towels, as many as you can grab." The woman hesitated. "Now," Emma barked, and the woman jumped. Her eyes cut to the robber. His mask was damp with sweat. His gun sagged at his side. He stared at the blood, horrified. "You," Emma said. Her voice was calm, unshakable. "Put the gun down, get over here, I need your hands." His eyes widened. I didn't mean." "I don't care what you meant. He's dying. Help or move out of my way." The gun clattered onto the counter. He pulled off his mask, revealing acne scars, tear-streaked cheeks. 22, maybe younger. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Pressure here." She grabbed his trembling hands, pressing them against the wound with the towel. "Don't let up. If you let go, he dies." His face went white, but he pressed down. Emma's own hands moved with muscle memory she had tried to erase. Pupils, responsive but sluggish. Abdomen, rigid, internal bleeding. She layered another towel, slowing the blood, buying time. Around her the cafe fell silent. People watched with wide eyes, as if realizing for the first time who she was. Not just a barista, not just a face behind foam and coffee. Her hair slipped loose from its bun. Blood streaked her arms. She looked nothing like the shy girl they had known. And for the first time in 3 years, Emma Carter wasn't hiding. But she hadn't told them everything, not yet. Because what truly haunted her, the reason she'd buried this part of herself so deep, was still locked away in her chest. The mission she'd never spoken of. The child with the bracelet. The night she had promised herself she was done. And yet here she was, hands deep in blood, commanding strangers, steady, unshaking. The sirens were still far away. The man was still fatting. The robber's hands were slick with red. Emma Carter, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, the medic she had tried to forget, was alive again. How long had it been since her hands had done this? 3 years, maybe more, but they hadn't forgotten. Blood seeped between her fingers, warm and slick, soaking through layers of café towels. The businessman's breaths came in shallow gasps, wet and uneven. His eyes darted toward her, desperate, confused. "You're okay," Emma murmured, her voice steady even though her chest was tight. "Stay with me, just breathe, don't fight it." "Am I dying?" His lips trembled. Emma didn't flinch. She'd been asked that question before, more times than she cared to remember. Soldiers with their guts open, their limbs gone, their eyes searching hers for hope. And every time she had lied. "You're going to be fine. You'll make it. Your family's waiting for you." Lies that gave them seconds of peace, even as life bled out of them. But tonight in this cafe, Emma's voice softened. "Not today, not while I'm here." She pressed harder, holding the robber's trembling hand steady against the wound. His tears dripped onto the blood-stained towels. He looked at her like a child, waiting for permission to keep breathing. "I didn't mean," his voice broke. "I know," Emma said flatly. "But meaning doesn't stop bleeding. Keep pressure, don't move." For a moment it was as if the cafe had stilled. The crying, the screams gone. Only the hiss of the espresso machine cooling down and the harsh rhythm of her patient's breath. Then the wail of sirens cracked the silence, faint but growing. 5 minutes, maybe less, but 5 minutes was an eternity in blood. Emma's mind betrayed her. The smell of coffee and pastry blurred into the acrid stench of dust and cordite. The tiles beneath her knees shifted into desert sand. And suddenly she was back in Kandahar, kneeling beside a soldier whose chest had been ripped apart by shrapnel, his breath rattling wet in her ear. "Emma, talk to me," a voice had shouted back then. "We're losing him." She had pressed, sutured, whispered hope into the void. For hours, her hands had been his only shield against the inevitable. He hadn't made it. She forced herself back into the present. Not now, not here. This wasn't the desert. This was a coffee shop. This man was still alive. She couldn't let herself slip. "Pulse is holding," she whispered to herself. She kept checking, counting, reassuring her own fear. Across the cafe, Sarah, her coworker, stood frozen with her phone pointed at the scene, recording. Miguel hovered near the door, useless, muttering prayers under his breath. "Emma," Sarah's voice cracked. How do you know what to do?" Emma ignored her. She was listening not to Sarah, not to the robber, but to the faint rasp of air scraping through the businessman's lungs. Counting, cataloging, keeping rhythm with every fatting beat. She pulled another apron from the counter, ripped it into strips, pressure bandage, improvised tourniquet if needed. Her motions were mechanical, deliberate. "You," she said sharply to the middle-aged woman crouched beside her. "What's your name?" "Patricia," the woman stammered. "Good, keep him awake. Ask his name, his family, anything to hold him here." Patricia nodded quickly, her voice soft but steady. Sir, can you hear me? What's your name?" "Robert," he rasped, his eyes fluttering. "Robert Chen," Patricia repeated. "Do you have kids, Robert?" He swallowed. "2 daughters." "Daughters, good. Think of them. Stay with us." Emma kept working, layering towels, shifting her weight, applying pressure where it mattered most. She looked at the robber, his hands soaked, his face pale. "Don't let go," she reminded him. I'm trying." "You're not trying, you're doing it. He's alive because of you right now. Don't fail him." Something flickered in his eyes, shame maybe, or the unbearable weight of realizing what his choices had caused. The sirens grew louder, closer. Emma's vision sharpened. This was the edge, the window where seconds mattered most. If Robert slipped now, he wouldn't make it to the ambulance. She leaned down, her voice close to his ear. "Stay awake, Robert. Breathe with me. In, out, in, out." His lips trembled, but he followed her rhythm. His grip on life, fragile but present. The cafe door banged open. Two paramedics stormed in, their bags hitting the floor. One older, gray-haired, steady. The other young, buzz-cut, eager but tense. "What do we have?" the older man asked, dropping to his knees beside her. Emma rattled it off in a clipped tone, the words spilling like muscle memory. Single GSW left abdomen. No exit wound. Entry about 3 inches off midline, 2 below the ribs. Possible splenic or renal involvement. Controlled bleeding with direct pressure. Patient conscious but in shock. 7 minutes down. The older paramedic froze, eyes locking on hers. "Who are you?" Emma's jaw clenched. "I work here." "That's not what I asked." She stepped back, giving them space. "Former Army medic, 68 whiskey." The younger paramedic's eyes widened. "Combat medic." Emma nodded once. "Staff sergeant, retired." The older man gave a low whistle. "You probably just bought him his life." She wiped her bloodied hands on her apron, trying not to feel anything. The paramedics went to work. IV line, oxygen mask, dressing the wound with proper gear she hadn't had. Emma hovered, watching, every instinct screaming to stay in control. But her job was done, for now. She stood slowly, her knees stiff, her hands trembling for the first time since it began. The world's noise came rushing back. The gasps, the murmurs, the weight of dozens of eyes. Emma Carter, invisible barista, had disappeared. In her place stood someone else, someone she thought she'd buried. The police arrived minutes later, guns drawn, sweeping the scene. The robber, Marcus, he whispered his name when they cuffed him, was led away in tears. Emma caught his eyes through the cruiser's window. He looked shattered, broken by his own choices. And strangely, she didn't feel anger, just exhaustion. The cafe emptied under flashing red and blue lights. Evidence markers, photographs, statements taken. And then silence. Emma stood outside, blood drying on her arms, apron stiff, staring at nothing. Sarah approached, voice trembling. "I had no idea," she whispered. "You've been here all this time, and none of us knew who you really were." Emma's throat was dry. That was the point. The officer taking her statement paused, pen hovering. "You said you were Army." "Yes." "How long?" 8 years, Afghanistan, Iraq." The officer studied her, then nodded slowly. "Most people with your training would have frozen. You didn't. You saved him." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to say it wasn't heroism, just reflex, wanted to say she hadn't wanted this, but the words lodged in her chest. The ambulance pulled away, Robert Chen inside, still alive. And Emma felt it, the old weight pressing down. The weight she had run from for years. The weight of memory. Because even as she saved him, she remembered the ones she hadn't. The children in Kandahar. The little girl with the blue bracelet. The face that had never left her. And she knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. That saving one man in a coffee shop was only the beginning of something she had tried so hard to escape. For the first time in years, Emma Carter was visible. And visibility was dangerous. Why did they keep calling her a hero? The word echoed everywhere, in the cafe, in the police station, on the endless scroll of headlines. Hero Barista. Combat medic saves life. A miracle in Madison. Emma Carter hated it. She sat in the small interview room at the station, her blood-stained apron folded tightly in her lap. The female officer across from her, Martinez, her name tag read, scribbled notes, her eyes flicking up every so often. "You're Emma Carter, the one who provided medical aid." Emma nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Walk me through it, from the moment he came in." Emma recited the events in a clinical tone. The robber's entrance, the businessman's lunge, the shot, her intervention. She left out the part about how easily the old instincts had slipped back, how it had felt like no time had passed at all. "And your medical training?" Martinez asked, pen still. "Army, I was a combat medic." For how long? 8 years. Martinez's pen scratched again. Then she paused, looking directly at her. Why'd you leave? Emma's jaw tightened. Because I was tired of seeing people bleed. It was the truth, just not the whole of it. By the time they released her, night had fallen. The café was cordoned off, crime scene tape fluttering in the breeze. Reporters clustered nearby, lights glaring, cameras waiting. Miss Carter, can we get a statement? How does it feel to be a hero? Were you really a combat medic in Afghanistan? She lowered her head and pushed through, her hands still trembling. She had faced mortar fire with more calm than she felt now. By morning, her face was everywhere. Local news first, then national. Sarah's shaky phone footage had gone viral. Emma vaulting the counter, her voice sharp, commanding, her hands steady in the blood. Millions had watched within hours. The captions wrote themselves. Former Army medic turned barista saves customer during armed robbery. She turned off the television, unplugged her phone, but it didn't matter. Her name was out. Her anonymity was gone. In her apartment that night, she sat on the couch holding the necklace she had kept hidden for years. The silver caduceus gleamed in the lamplight. She had worn it every day but never shown it. It felt heavier now, as if every life she had touched hung from the chain. The knock on the door startled her. She peered through the peephole. Officer Martinez, not in uniform, just jeans and a jacket, holding a paper bag. Emma opened the door cautiously. "Don't worry," Martinez said, lifting the bag. "Not official business, just coffee, thought you might need it." Emma let her in. They sat at the small kitchen table, steam rising from the cups. "How are you holding up?" Martinez asked gently. Emma sipped, buying time. "I'm fine." That's what everyone says when they're not fine. Emma said nothing. "Mr. Chen made it through surgery," Martinez offered. "Doctor says he'll recover." Emma's chest eased, but only slightly. "He wants to meet you," Martinez continued, "to thank you." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not, but he's insistent." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Martinez's eyes sharpened. "Why'd you really leave the army, Emma?" The question hit harder than she expected. She gripped her cup, knuckles white. "I told you, I was tired of blood." "That's not the whole truth, is it?" Emma looked up, startled. The officer's gaze was calm, not accusing, just knowing, like she had seen too many people carry secrets. "There was a mission," Emma whispered, almost to herself. "My last deployment." Martinez leaned back, saying nothing, letting the silence open the wound. "We were providing medical support for a special operations team outside Kandahar. Wrong intel, wrong building, kids inside." Emma's voice cracked, but she pressed on. "I worked on them for 6 hours, did everything right, everything I'd been trained to do, and 3 still died." Her hands shook. She stared at them as if the blood was still there. One of them was a girl, maybe 8 years old. She had a bracelet, blue beads, little star charm. I kept working on her even after she was gone. I couldn't stop, because stopping meant I'd failed, meant I let her die. Her voice fell to a whisper. "These hands remember everything, every life I couldn't save." Martinez's eyes softened. "So you ran." "I survived," Emma said bitterly. "There's a difference." They sat in silence, the hum of the fridge filling the space. "You know what I saw when I watched that video," Martinez said finally. "I didn't see someone running. I saw someone who ran toward danger, someone whose hands remembered how to save." Emma shook her head. "It doesn't erase what happened." "No," Martinez agreed, "but maybe it adds to it." The officer left not long after, leaving Emma alone with her necklace, her ghosts, and the terrible truth. Martinez was right. Saving Robert Chen didn't erase the girl with the bracelet, but it was another line in the ledger, another name her hands had chosen life for. The days blurred. News vans camped outside the cafe. Reporters ambushed her on the street. "Emma, will you give us an interview? Emma, are you planning to go back into service? Emma, how does it feel to be called a hero? She ducked her head, pulled her jacket tighter, wished herself invisible again. But invisibility was gone. At the cafe reopening, the bullet hole patched and the floor scrubbed, customers looked at her differently. Not as the shy barista anymore. As someone they whispered about, pointed to. That's her. That's the medic. Robert Chen came in 2 weeks later, pale but walking, his wife by his side. "You're Emma Carter," he said softly. She nodded. "You saved me. My daughters still have their father because of you." His eyes were wet. "You gave me my future back." Emma swallowed hard. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone, you." His wife hugged her. Emma stiffened, unused to the warmth. That night she found a package waiting at her door. No return address. Inside, a letter, typed on official Army letterhead. "Staff Sergeant Carter, I saw the news. Well done. The intervention you provided was textbook perfect. You were one of the finest medics I ever had the honor of commanding. I respected your decision to leave then. I respect it now. But if you ever decide to return, the door is open. The world needs people like you. Whatever you decide, remember this. You carried the weight of those you lost for too long. It's time to remember the ones you saved." Colonel James Richards, U.S. Army. Emma read it 3 times. Tears blurred the words. Her hands remembered death, but they also remembered life. And the truth she had tried so hard to deny pressed in on her chest. She couldn't outrun who she was. Why couldn't she walk through the door? Emma Carter stood frozen outside County General Hospital, her sneakers rooted to the concrete as the sliding glass doors hissed open and shut for strangers who had no idea who she was. She had been here 10 minutes already, unable to move. Hospitals smelled like antiseptic and fear. They sounded like heart monitors, like ventilators, like whispered prayers. To Emma, they were battlefields without bullets. She almost turned away, almost convinced herself she didn't owe him anything. But Robert Chen, the man whose blood had soaked her hands, whose life had clung to her grip, had asked for her. Insisted, according to Officer Martinez. And Emma, who had spent 3 years hiding from the past, found she couldn't ignore him. She walked inside. The receptionist glanced up but said nothing. Emma's throat felt dry as she asked for Robert's room. 41, 4th floor, the woman said. Emma took the stairs, needing the extra time. Each step echoed like a countdown. By the time she reached the 4th floor, her heart was hammering against her ribs. She stopped outside his door, listened. A woman's voice drifted from inside, soft, firm, protective. His wife, no doubt. Emma knocked. "Come in," Robert's voice answered, weaker than she remembered but alive. She pushed the door open. Robert Chen lay in the hospital bed, pale but smiling faintly. His wife sat beside him, their hands entwined. Machines beeped softly at his bedside. He looked smaller now, diminished by the white sheets and tubes. But his eyes carried something Emma wasn't ready for: gratitude. "You're her," Robert said, voice trembling. "The barista, Emma Carter." She nodded, hovering by the door, unsure if she should step closer. He tried to sit up, wincing. His wife pressed him back gently. "I'm sorry," Robert said. "My manners. This is my wife, Lisa. Lisa, this is the woman who saved my life." Lisa Chen stood, crossing the room in 3 strides. Before Emma could react, Lisa wrapped her arms around her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for bringing him back to us." Emma froze, stiff in the embrace. She hadn't been hugged like this in years. Her throat tightened. "I just did what I could." Lisa stepped back, wiping her eyes. "What you did was everything." Robert's gaze locked on her. "Do you know what I kept thinking lying there on that cafe floor? I thought, this is how I die, over coffee, because I was stupid enough to play hero." His voice cracked. "And then you were there. Your hands were so steady. Your voice was calm, and I thought maybe I'm not going to die. Maybe someone who knows what they're doing is here. Emma gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. She wanted to disappear. Robert's eyes glistened. I have 2 daughters, 7 and 9. Because of you, they still have a father. Because of you, my wife isn't a widow. Because of you, I get to see them grow up. His voice steadied. You gave me my future back. The words struck Emma harder than any bullet ever could. She swallowed, her chest aching. For 3 years she had carried ghosts, the soldiers she couldn't save, the children whose faces haunted her dreams. She had measured her worth by her failures, and now here was a man telling her she had given him back his life, his family, his tomorrow. Thank you, Robert said simply. Emma felt something crack open inside. She had been waiting years to hear those words, not from him specifically, from anyone. Proof that what she had done mattered, that her hands weren't just instruments of failure. You're welcome, she whispered, the words foreign and fragile on her tongue. The room was quiet for a long time. Lisa finally smiled softly. You're always welcome here, Emma. You're part of our family now. Family? The word landed heavy. Emma nodded but didn't trust herself to speak. When she finally left the hospital, the sun was setting, painting the sky in muted golds. Emma walked home slowly, her chest hollow and full all at once. She had thought meeting Robert would feel like closure. Instead, it felt like a door reopening. At her apartment, she found a package waiting at the door. No return address. Inside, a letter on military letterhead. Staff Sergeant Emma Carter. I hope this letter finds you well. I've followed the reports of the Morning Brew Cafe incident. First, well done. Your actions saved a life. You demonstrated exactly why you were one of the finest medics under my command. I respected your decision to leave the service then. I respect it now. But know this, if you ever wish to return, the door is open. You've carried the weight of those you lost for too long. It's time to remember the ones you saved. Stay strong, Carter. Whether in uniform or in an apron, you're still saving lives. Some people are built that way. Respectfully, Colonel James Richards. Emma read the letter 3 times. Tears blurred the words. She thought of Robert Chen and his daughters. She thought of the 47 soldiers whose names she still remembered. She thought of the little girl with the blue bracelet, the one she had carried in silence. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, the cafe reopens tomorrow. Will you be there? Emma stared at it. Then she looked at the silver necklace on her table, the caduceus she had hidden for years. Slowly, she picked it up and clasped it around her neck. Her reply was simple, I'll be there. But later that night, she opened her laptop and typed something she hadn't thought she would ever search again. Paramedic certification programs. Because maybe, just maybe, there was a middle ground. Maybe she didn't have to go back to war. Maybe she didn't have to disappear into silence. Maybe saving lives didn't mean sacrificing her soul. Maybe being a hero wasn't about what you called yourself. Maybe it was simply about showing up when you were needed, whether in a desert or a coffee shop or a city street. Emma closed her laptop, touching the necklace at her chest. For the first time in years, her hands felt lighter. Why did it feel like starting over and going back at the same time? Emma Carter sat in a cramped classroom at the community college, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a stack of textbooks open in front of her. On the whiteboard, an instructor scribbled diagrams of the circulatory system, explaining shock protocols she already knew by heart. Around her, students whispered, some taking notes furiously, others slouched, already bored. Emma's pen tapped against her notebook, not from impatience but from memory. She had learned all of this before. Not here, not like this, but in the desert, with bullets in the air, with sand blowing in her eyes, with soldiers bleeding out in front of her. There, mistakes meant death. Here, they meant red ink on a test. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt dissonance. You're Emma, right? The voice broke her concentration. She looked up. A girl, maybe 20, dark hair tied back, leaned toward her. I've seen you before. "You're that barista from the news." Emma stiffened. "I work at Morning Brew." "No, I mean," the girl's eyes widened. "You're the combat medic, the one who saved that guy. Everyone was sharing it online." Emma forced a small nod, hoping the conversation would end there. The girl smiled in awe. "That's amazing. You must have so many stories." Emma's stomach knotted. Stories. She had them, yes. Stories of blood, screaming, loss. Stories of things no 20-year-old paramedic student needed to hear. She muttered, "It was just one moment," and turned back to her notes. But the whispers followed her all week. Students glanced her way, professors lingered at her desk. Even in the cafeteria, strangers recognized her. Hero barista, viral medic, invisible no longer. At the cafe, the same thing happened. Customers she had served for years now looked at her differently. They asked her about Afghanistan while ordering cappuccinos. They told her how brave she was, how inspiring. They tipped heavily, wrote thank you notes, slid cards of gratitude across the counter. She smiled politely, but inside she recoiled. They didn't know her. They didn't know the bracelet, the children, the weight. They only saw the edited version of her life, the one caught on Sarah's shaky phone camera. But the one person who never asked, never prodded, was Officer Linda Martinez. Every Wednesday, Martinez came to the cafe after her shift, sat at the corner table and drank coffee. Sometimes they talked about nothing, about everything. Sometimes they sat in silence, and Emma found that silence easier than words. It was during one of those silences that Martinez finally said, "I heard you're back in training." Emma nodded, eyes on her mug. "Paramedic certification." "Good," Martinez studied her. "Feels right, doesn't it?" Emma hesitated. "It feels familiar. My hands remember. My brain remembers. But part of me still wonders if I should have let it stay buried." Martinez tilted her head. "Why?" "Because the moment I touched that man's blood, I remembered everything else." Emma's voice was low, tight. "The ones I couldn't save, the ones who didn't make it, it's like they came back with me." Martinez didn't flinch. "Maybe that's the price. You don't get to choose which memories come, but you get to choose what to do with them." Emma wanted to argue but couldn't, because deep down she knew the officer was right. Her training days bled into cafe nights. She carried flashcards in her apron pocket, memorized drug dosages between latte orders, practiced CPR on a classroom mannequin, then scrubbed milk foam from the espresso machine hours later. Exhaustion set in, but so did purpose. One evening after class, the instructor asked her to stay behind. "Emma, your scores are near perfect, but it's not just knowledge. The way you handle scenarios, the calm you bring, it's unusual. Most people panic, even in training. You don't." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "I've had practice." The instructor smiled faintly. "That's an understatement, isn't it?" She said nothing. At night she dreamed again, not of coffee shops or classrooms, but of Kandahar. The bracelet glimmered in the dark. The little girl's face surfaced. Emma woke with her fists clenched, sweat dampening her sheets. She touched the silver necklace at her chest, whispering to the silence, "I'm trying." The city around her didn't let her forget. News stories still resurfaced. Hero barista now training as paramedic. Strangers reached out online, begging for interviews. Old army comrades she hadn't spoken to in years sent messages. "Proud of you, Carter. Always knew you'd come back." But the hardest came one Sunday morning. She was working the register when a man approached, holding the hand of a little boy. "You're her, aren't you, Emma Carter?" His voice was quiet, reverent. Emma froze. "My wife, she died last year. Car accident. The paramedics tried, but..." His eyes were wet. "You don't know me, but I saw your story. I just wanted to say thank you for being out there, for saving people, for being someone's miracle." He squeezed his son's hand. "Not everyone gets that." Emma's throat closed. She whispered, "I'm sorry for your loss." He nodded. "Don't be, just keep doing what you're doing. The world needs you." They left, and Emma stood there, stunned. The words "the world needs you" rang like a command she hadn't asked for. Later that night, she confided in Martinez. "I don't want to be anyone's miracle. I just want to live quietly." Martinez sipped her coffee. "Quiet living isn't for everyone. You can't change what your hands know how to do. You can only decide whether you'll use them." Emma stared at her scarred fingers, remembering every tourniquet tied, every chest compressed, every whisper of "you'll be okay," true or not. And she realized Martinez was right again. She couldn't unknow what she knew. She couldn't unlearn who she was. But the question that haunted her now wasn't whether she could save lives. It was whether she could save herself in the process. The answer, she suspected, was still far away. How do you prepare to face ghosts when you never buried them properly? Emma Carter pulled on the navy blue trainee jacket, the reflective stripes catching in the fluorescent lights of the station bay. The letters on the back, EMS, felt foreign against her shoulders. She had worn uniforms before, but never this one. "You ready?" The paramedic beside her, tall, grizzled, hair peppered gray, studied her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. His name was Dan, 20 years on the job, the kind of man who had seen it all. Emma nodded, ready. "You'll be in the back with me," he said. "Observe first. Don't touch unless I say got it." "Yes, sir." He smirked. "Do sir me. I'm not the army, I'm just Dan." The ambulance rumbled to life. Emma slid into the back, the smell of antiseptic mixing with worn leather, the hum of the diesel engine vibrating under her boots. For a moment she closed her eyes, remembering another hum, rotors whipping desert air, helicopters heavy with wounded. Her pulse quickened. She forced herself to breathe. The radio crackled. "Dispatch. Unit 12, respond to a possible cardiac arrest, residential address." Dan slapped the console. "Here we go." The ambulance roared forward. Lights flashed red against the city streets. Emma's stomach tightened, but her hands remained steady in her lap. She had been here before, not this city, not this truck, but in chaos, with seconds ticking away like gunfire. They arrived at a small apartment building. Neighbors crowded the hallway, faces pale. Inside, a woman sobbed beside a man slumped on the floor, mid-50s, no pulse. Dan dropped to his knees instantly. "CPR, let's go." Emma froze for just a second. The image blurred, not a man in an apartment but a soldier on desert ground, dust in his hair, chest still. She blinked hard, forcing herself back. "Carter," Dan barked. She snapped down beside him. "Yes." "Compress." She laced her hands, placed them over the sternum and began. 30 compressions. Her arms pumped, body weight behind each push. Her mind slipped into cadence. 1, 2, 3, she counted silently, keeping rhythm. The sound of ribs shifting beneath her palms didn't break her focus. She'd heard worse. Dan set up the airway, the defibrillator pads. Clear. The shock jolted the man's body. Emma resumed compressions instantly. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but her face was calm. Her voice, when she spoke, was even. Still asystole, continuing CPR. Dan glanced at her, not just surprised at her composure, but at her language. She didn't sound like a trainee. She sounded like someone who had done this more times than she wanted to admit. 2 minutes stretched, then 3, then 4. Finally, a weak pulse flickered under Dan's fingers. "He's back," Dan muttered, relief in his tone. The wife sobbed, clutching Emma's arm. "Thank you, thank you." Emma looked away, her chest aching, not from exhaustion, from memory, from the times when there hadn't been a pulse, when compressions had ended in silence. They loaded the man into the ambulance. Emma rode in the back, holding oxygen, monitoring vitals. Her eyes stayed on the monitor, but her mind drifted. The man's gray hair blurred into a boy's buzz cut. His blue lips became a child's bracelet, blue beads and a star charm. She gripped the railing above her head, fighting the memory down. Focus. Present. Pulse is weak but steady. Oxygen saturation rising, he might make it. At the hospital, they transferred him to the ER team. Dan clapped her on the shoulder. "Nice work, Carter. Not bad for your first ride." Emma forced a nod. "Thanks." But when she stepped outside, the night air hit her like a wave. She leaned against the ambulance, shaking, not from fear, from the past clawing its way back. She pressed her hands together, still feeling the phantom beat of compressions, still hearing the silence that had followed years ago when compressions had failed. "Hey," Dan's voice was softer now. He stood beside her, lighting a cigarette he didn't smoke, just held. "That wasn't your first time, was it?" Emma didn't answer. He studied her, then nodded slowly. "Thought so. You've got the hands of someone who's done this before, in worse places." Her jaw clenched. He exhaled smoke without inhaling. "Listen, people like you carry ghosts. I've seen it before, but don't let them lie to you. Tonight that man's alive because of you. That matters, even if the ghosts scream otherwise." Emma's throat tightened. She managed. "Sometimes the ghosts scream louder." Dan didn't argue, just stood with her until her breathing steadied. Back at the station, she washed her hands at the sink, watching the water swirl red-tinted down the drain. Not his blood, she knew that. Just her own memory painting it. She stared at her hands, scarred, trembling, strong. At the cafe the next morning, Sarah and Miguel peppered her with questions. "How was it? What was it like? Did you save someone again?" Emma shrugged, tying her apron. "Just training." But inside, she knew it was just. It was the beginning of something she had both dreaded and needed. Proof that she could still do it. Proof that she hadn't been wrong to step back into the field. And yet, as she handed lattes across the counter, she felt the girl with the bracelet watching her from the edges of memory. Silent. Accusing. A reminder that ghosts didn't vanish just because you saved someone new. Later that week, another call. This one worse. A car accident on the interstate, twisted metal, a teenager trapped. Emma crawled into the wreckage beside him, holding his hand while Dan worked the extrication. She whispered the same lies she had whispered to soldiers. "You're going to be okay. Just hold on." He lived barely. That night, Emma sat alone in her apartment, her paramedic textbooks open but unread. The necklace lay heavy at her chest. She whispered into the silence, "I can't do this again." Then softer, "But I can't not do it either." Her phone buzzed. A text from Martinez. "You saved another one today. Don't forget that." Emma stared at the message, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time in years, she admitted something to herself. Saving lives wasn't the part that broke her. It was carrying them afterward. The weight of the living and the dead alike. And now, with every siren, every call, every pair of eyes looking to her hands, she felt that weight returning, heavier than ever. Why did the gratitude hurt more than the blood? Emma Carter asked herself that late at night, sitting on the edge of her bed, textbooks stacked untouched on the floor. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she ignored. Reporters, strangers, even army buddies she hadn't spoken to in years. "You're an inspiration. Proud of you. Hero." She hated the word, hero. In the cafe, customers lined up not just for coffee but for her presence. They stared, whispered, pointed. Some asked for photos. One mother even brought her teenage son, pressing him forward shyly. "He wants to meet you," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "He's thinking of becoming a medic because of you." Emma forced a polite smile, shook the boy's hand. But inside she recoiled. She didn't want to be anyone's example. Miguel grinned, nudging her after the boy left. "You've got fans now. Admit it, Em, it's kinda cool." She didn't answer. Cool wasn't the word. Suffocating was closer. Even in paramedic training, eyes followed her. Professors called her a natural. Students whispered about her army past. One boy asked bluntly during lunch, "So, like, how many people have you seen die?" Emma stood, walked out, left her tray untouched. She couldn't give him an answer that wouldn't haunt him. It was Officer Martinez who noticed first. Emma had skipped their weekly coffee, then another. Finally, Martinez showed up at the cafe, leaning on the counter until Emma looked up. "You're disappearing again," Martinez said softly. Emma's hands froze on the register. "I'm busy." "No," Martinez countered. "You're hiding, there's a difference." Emma opened her mouth to argue, but the sirens that suddenly screamed down Fifth Street cut through the cafe walls. An ambulance tore past, lights strobing. Her chest tightened. Every siren now felt like a summons. That evening during her ride along, the call came. Dispatch crackled. "Unit 12, respond. Child female, approximately 8 years old, vehicle versus pedestrian, unresponsive." Emma's stomach dropped. The number, the age, pierced her like glass. 8. The ambulance wailed through traffic. Dan muttered under his breath, "Brace yourself." They arrived to chaos. A crowd of neighbors, a crushed bicycle, a little girl lying still on the asphalt, her hair fanned around her head like a halo. Blood smeared across her shirt. Emma froze at the sight. Her vision doubled, the asphalt flickering into desert sand, the girl blurring into another child, tiny wrist adorned with blue beads and a star charm. The bracelet. Her chest seized. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Carter," Dan's bark snapped her back. "Move." Her body obeyed before her mind did. She dropped beside the child, hands trembling but precise. Airway, pulse, weak fatting. She pressed compressions into her tiny chest, counting, steady, mechanical. But in her head, she wasn't in the city anymore. She was back in Kandahar, the little girl on her table, the bracelet slipping from her wrist as her heart stopped. Emma's hands had pressed then, too. Harder, faster, for hours, until they were bloody and blistered, until someone had pulled her away. "She's gone, Carter, she's gone." "Not again, not this time." "Stay with me," Emma whispered to the girl on the pavement. "Stay." Her voice broke. The defibrillator pads shocked. The child's body jolted, still nothing. Compressions resumed. Emma kept pressing, tears sliding down her face, mixing with sweat. Dan's voice cut through. "We've got something," faint rhythm. Emma gasped. She pressed her ear to the girl's chest. A flutter, fragile but real. "She's back," Emma whispered, disbelief and relief colliding. "She's back." They rushed her into the ambulance, Emma riding in the back, holding the tiny hand. The girl's eyelids fluttered once, then stilled. Machines beeped, numbers shaky but holding. Emma didn't speak until they reached the ER. She handed the child over, her hands soaked, her chest hollow. In the quiet afterward, Dan studied her. "That wasn't just a call for you, was it?" Emma stared at her trembling fingers. "No." "You saw someone else?" She nodded once, couldn't speak. Dan sighed, lighting another unlit cigarette. "You saved her, don't forget that." But Emma couldn't stop thinking about the one she hadn't, the one with the bracelet, the one who never opened her eyes again. That night Emma sat in her apartment, lights off, the city glowing faint outside. She held her necklace tight in her fist, shaking. When Martinez knocked, Emma didn't answer at first, but the officer's voice came through the door. "Emma, you can't carry this alone forever." Emma opened the door slowly. Her face was pale, eyes red. Martinez stepped inside without a word, sat at the table, waited. Finally Emma whispered, "She was 8, Kandahar, wrong intel. We raided the wrong building. There were kids inside. I worked on her for hours. She had this bracelet, blue beads, little star charm. She died anyway." Her voice cracked, "And tonight I saw her again." Martinez reached across the table, resting a hand over Emma's trembling fist. But this time, the girl lived. Emma broke then, silent sobs shaking her body. Years of suppressed grief, guilt, and exhaustion pouring out. Martinez didn't speak, just sat with her, steady, unflinching. When the sobs faded, Emma whispered, "I don't know how to carry both, the ones I saved, the ones I lost." Martinez's voice was quiet. "Maybe you don't have to carry them alone." Emma looked up, tears streaking her face. For the first time in years, she let someone else hold part of the weight. Why did peace feel like something she had to learn again, like a language she once knew but forgot? Weeks passed after the call with the little girl, and Emma Carter found herself walking differently. Not lighter, the ghosts were still there, but steadier. Something inside her had shifted when she finally said the words out loud, when she let Martinez hear the story she had carried in silence for years. The girl from the accident survived. Emma visited her once quietly, slipping into the hospital room with no cameras, no headlines. The child lay pale but smiling, clutching a stuffed bear in one hand, her wrist wrapped in gauze. Her parents looked up in shock when Emma appeared. "You're," the mother began. Emma raised a hand. Just someone who happened to be there." The father's eyes filled with tears. "You saved her life." Emma's throat tightened. She glanced at the little girl who looked at her with wide, curious eyes. No blue bracelet this time, just a hospital wristband, a chance at tomorrow. Emma smiled softly, brushed the child's hair back. "Be brave," she whispered. That was all. She left before anyone could thank her again. Gratitude still felt like a weight she wasn't sure how to hold, but for the first time it didn't crush her. It warmed her faintly, like the first flicker of sunrise. At the cafe, things had changed. She was still behind the counter most mornings, still tying on the brown apron, still grinding beans and steaming milk. But the whispers had faded. The stares softened. People knew who she was now, and yet somehow that made her less invisible, not more. Customers greeted her by name. Sarah no longer recorded her in secret but worked beside her with genuine respect. Miguel stopped joking about fans and simply asked how her classes were going. And Robert Chen came every Tuesday morning, smiling as he ordered his cappuccino with oat milk. He always left a $20 tip, no matter what. He never gave speeches, never made her uncomfortable with long declarations. He just smiled, nodded, and lived. That, more than any words, was thanks enough. One afternoon, Emma sat at the back table with Officer Martinez. Their coffees cooled between them as city noise drifted in through the window. "You're different," Martinez said after a while. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "You used to shrink. Now you sit taller. You still hate being called a hero, but you don't run from it anymore." Emma thought about that. She stirred her coffee slowly. "Maybe I realized I don't have to be one or the other, barista or medic, invisible or visible. I can just be both." Martinez smirked. "Balance not easy to find." "No," Emma agreed, "but worth trying." Silence settled between them again, the kind that felt comfortable. Healing didn't come with speeches or sudden revelations. It came with mornings of coffee, with nights of studying, with quiet conversations where someone sat across from you and refused to let you drown alone. Emma's paramedic certification came months later. She stood in a small auditorium, a certificate in her hand, the reflective jacket now fully hers. Applause echoed, but she barely heard it. What she heard instead were the voices in her head, the soldiers she'd saved, the children she hadn't, Robert Chen, the girl from the accident, the countless lives that had brushed against her hands. She didn't erase any of them. She didn't silence them. She carried them, all of them. That night back at the cafe, she locked the door after closing. The espresso machine hissed softly as it cooled. The shop smelled of roasted beans and sugar, the same as it had every morning she'd worked there. Emma leaned on the counter, touching the silver caduceus at her chest. The necklace no longer felt like a secret. It felt like a reminder. She whispered into the empty cafe, "I couldn't save you all, but I'll keep saving whoever I can." And for the first time in years, that promise didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a path. The next morning, the cafe bustled as usual. Construction workers, nurses, students. Emma tied her apron, pulled her hair back, and began her routine. To the untrained eye, she looked the same as always. But the regulars noticed the difference, not in her uniform, not in her movements, but in the way she carried herself. Quiet strength, visible now. And when a customer dropped a cup and shattered it across the tiles, Emma crouched without hesitation, cleaning it up calmly, smiling faintly at the flustered man. "It's just a cup," she said softly. "We've all survived worse." Later, she would ride the ambulance again. Later, she would kneel beside strangers and hold their hands as life trembled between leaving and staying. Later, she would go home, make tea, and sit with her ghosts. But in that moment, she was simply Emma Carter, barista, medic, human, whole, even in her brokenness. Because she had finally understood something. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't erase the past or silence the ghosts. Sometimes dignity simply acts, quietly, steadily, again and again. And that was enough.